There is a specific kind of heartbreak that happens only in the kitchen. A moment of profound disappointment when you pull a tray of cookies or a cake pan out of the oven and realize that something has gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. You followed the steps, you measured the flour, and you didn't burn it. Yet instead of a lofty, airy sponge or a tender, chewy cookie, you are staring at a dense, rubbery puck that looks more like a hockey accessory than a dessert. If you trace your steps back through the chaotic scene on your counter, the culprit is almost always sitting right there in plain sight, hiding in a white, powdery disguise. It is the classic mix-up, the confusion between baking soda and baking powder. They look identical, often sit right next to each other on the grocery store shelf, and perform the same basic function of making things rise. Yet they are chemically distinct worlds apart. Confusing them isn't just a minor error. It is a chemical betrayal that alters the texture, the taste, and the visual appeal of your hard work. Today, we are going to strip away the confusion and look at the molecular dance happening inside your mixing bowl. We are going to explore why one needs acid and the other needs heat, why you sometimes need both, and how to master these white powders to ensure your culinary creations never fall flat again. To truly understand the difference, we have to start with the powerhouse of the pantry, baking soda. If you want to get technical, and we certainly do, this is pure sodium bicarbonate. In the grand spectrum of pH levels, which measures how acidic or basic a substance is, baking soda sits firmly on the alkaline side. It is a base, a mineral salt that is chemically yearning for balance. On its own, sitting in the box or even mixed into plain water, it is dormant and waiting for a partner to dance with. The magic trick of baking soda is only revealed when it is introduced to an acid. This is the exact same reaction you likely performed in elementary school when you poured vinegar into a papier-mâché volcano. That violent fizzy eruption is carbon dioxide gas frantically escaping the liquid. In your kitchen, the volcano is microscopic. When you mix baking soda with acidic ingredients like yogurt, brown sugar, molasses, buttermilk, or even natural cocoa powder, millions of tiny gas bubbles act as a lifting gas, trapped within the gluten network of your flour, forcing the batter to expand and rise. However, there is a volatile nature to baking soda that every baker must respect, because this chemical reaction does not wait for you to be ready. It is immediate and ruthless. As soon as the alkaline soda meets the acidic moisture in your batter, the gas production begins instantly. This creates a frantic race against the clock. If you leave your pancake batter sitting on the counter while you take a phone call, or if you let your cookie dough rest too long before getting it into the heat, those bubbles will simply float to the surface and pop, escaping into the air rather than lifting your dough. Once the gas is gone, it is gone forever, and you are left with a heavy, flat product. This is why recipes relying heavily on baking soda often feel urgent. They demand that you mix your wet and dry ingredients and get them into the oven immediately so the heat can set the structure before the bubbles run out of steam. This volatility and the requirement for specific acidic ingredients is exactly why baking powder was invented. Think of baking powder as the sophisticated self-contained evolution of baking soda. It was designed for consistency and convenience, solving the problem of finding an acid to pair with the base. Baking powder is essentially a prepackaged chemistry kit. It contains sodium bicarbonate, just like baking soda, but it also includes a powdered acid, usually cream of tartar, and a starch, often cornstarch or potato starch. The starch isn't there for lift. It plays the role of a peacekeeper, absorbing moisture from the air to prevent the acid and base from reacting prematurely inside the tin. This genius formulation means that baking powder is neutral. It doesn't need you to add buttermilk or lemon juice to the recipe to work. You can use neutral liquids like milk, water, or cream, and the baking powder will still do its job because it brought its own acid to the party. The engineering of baking powder goes even deeper than just being a pre-mixed convenience. Modern food science has given us what is known as double-acting baking powder, which is the standard tub you likely have in your cupboard right now. This is a fail-safe mechanism designed to save home cooks from the urgency that baking soda demands. Double-acting powder contains two different types of acids. The first is soluble at room temperature, meaning it reacts the moment it gets wet, creating that initial lift in the mixing bowl. But the second acid is heat-activated. It remains dormant until your batter reaches a certain temperature inside the oven. This provides a secondary, powerful burst of gas midway through the baking process, often called oven spring. This two-stage rocket system ensures that even if you are slow to scoop your muffins, or if your oven isn't quite up to temperature when you slide the pan in, you still get a reliable, uniform rise. One of the most frequent questions that plagues amateur bakers is whether these two white powders are interchangeable in a pinch. The answer is a complicated sort of, but with significant risks. You cannot simply swap them one for one. Baking soda is roughly 3 to 4 times more powerful than baking powder. If a recipe calls for baking powder and you mistakenly toss in an equal amount of baking soda, the result will be catastrophic. Not only will the rise be unpredictable, but without enough acid in the recipe to neutralize that potent sodium bicarbonate, you will be left with a soapy, metallic, bitter taste that renders the food inedible. It creates a chemical burn on the tongue that no amount of sugar can hide. Furthermore, excess alkalinity can cause the crumb to turn a strange greenish-yellow hue, which is rarely the aesthetic you are going for in a vanilla cake. Conversely, trying to use baking powder when a recipe specifically calls for soda presents a different set of problems. Because baking powder is mostly filler, starch and acid, you would need to use 3 or 4 times the amount of powder to get the same lift as a single teaspoon of soda. Adding that much extra powder introduces a massive amount of extra acid and starch into your batter, which can make the final product taste distinctively tangy or acidic, and can mess with the delicate liquid ratios of the dough. While you can technically make baking powder at home by mixing baking soda with cream of tartar, trying to engineer the reverse is chemically impossible. The golden rule, therefore, is to trust the recipe developer. They have calculated the pH balance of the ingredients, and they have chosen the leavener that fits the chemistry of the bowl. This leads us to the baffling scenario where a recipe, perhaps a sophisticated chocolate chip cookie or a rich devil's food cake, demands both baking powder and baking soda. This is not redundancy, it is a calculated balancing act. Baking is as much about flavor and color as it is about texture. While baking powder does the heavy lifting to ensure the cake rises, the baking soda is often added to neutralize a specific acidic ingredient, like sour cream or brown sugar, without overinflating the batter. But there is a secondary secret role for baking soda here: browning. Alkalinity promotes the Maillard reaction, that complex chemical process that gives baked goods their golden brown crust and deep toasted flavor. If you rely solely on baking powder, your cookies might come out pale and soft. A pinch of baking soda kicks up the pH just enough to ensure beautiful browning and a savory depth of flavor, while the baking powder handles the structural integrity. Beyond the oven, the divergence between these two substances becomes even more apparent. Baking soda is the ultimate household multitasker because of its abrasive texture and its ability to neutralize odors chemically. It doesn't just mask smells, because most foul odors are acidic. The alkaline soda neutralizes them at a molecular level, rendering them odorless. This makes it perfect for scrubbing grout, freshening carpets, or acting as a gentle exfoliant. It acts as a fire extinguisher for grease fires and can even soothe insect bites. Baking powder, however, is a one-trick pony. Because it contains starch and acid, using it for cleaning creates a sticky, pasty mess. It doesn't have the same odor-neutralizing power because its pH is already balanced. If you sprinkle baking powder in your gym shoes, you are just making your shoes dusty. In the world of utility, soda reigns supreme, while powder belongs strictly in the baking aisle. Even with this knowledge, mistakes happen, and they usually stem from how we store these ingredients. There is a common misconception that these powders last forever. They do not. Baking powder is particularly susceptible to humidity. If you live in a humid climate, moisture in the air can seep into the container and cause the acid and base to react slowly over months, leaving you with a dead powder. Before you start a big project, you should always test your supply. For baking powder, drop a teaspoon into hot water. If it bubbles aggressively, it is alive and ready. If it just sits there making cloudy water, throw it out. For baking soda, drop it into vinegar. No fizz means no lift. Using expired leaveners is the silent killer of great recipes, leading to dense, sad cakes regardless of how well you whisk the eggs. Another frequent error is the heavy hand. Many new bakers assume that adding more leavener will result in an even lighter, fluffier cake. In reality, Over-leavening is just as dangerous as under-leavening. If you add too much gas too quickly, the bubbles will expand until they burst the structure of the cake before it sets. The cake will rise impressively in the oven, looking like a triumph, and then collapse in the center the moment you take it out, creating a crater. Furthermore, too much baking soda disrupts the gluten network, causing the cake to become coarse and crumbly rather than tender. Precision is key. These are chemical reagents, not spices to be sprinkled to taste. So, as we close the pantry door on this investigation, the distinction should be clear. Baking soda is the raw, powerful, alkaline muscle that demands an acidic partner and quick reflexes. It provides the kick for browning and neutralizes tang. Baking powder is the refined, reliable engineer, a complete package designed for lift and consistency, utilizing heat to give you a second chance. They are not rivals, but rather specialized tools in your culinary arsenal. Understanding the interplay between acid, base, heat, and time transforms you from someone who simply follows instructions into someone who understands the architecture of food. The next time you reach for that teaspoon, you will know exactly why you are choosing the box or the tin, and you will understand the invisible reactions that turn a bowl of wet sludge into a golden, rising masterpiece. Thank you for spending this time with us to unravel the mysteries of the kitchen. If there is another common household item or a confusing pair of ingredients you have always wondered about, please let us know in the comments section below. We read every suggestion and love diving into the topics that make your daily life a little more interesting. We will be sure to credit you if we select your topic for a future deep dive.